So I went into Suzume wanting to be swept away into a fantastical movie, and that's exactly what I got. But beneath the surface, there is a deep and moving story that's really what makes this film so special.
Bing bong.
Now, on the surface, Suzume is a story of a girl tasked with closing these different portals in Japan, all of which represented by different doorways, of which a demon is attempting to escape. And if that demon does happen to escape, then Japan is essentially doomed. Even if you took this film just on the basis of that story alone, it is an absolute blast. This is a fantasy adventure that from start to end is an incredibly fun ride. But what really sets this film apart is how it handles characters that are dealing with incredibly complex issues. Grief, trauma, depression, loneliness, love, and loss. And this story really digs into what makes people human. Right off the bat, I have to mention the animation style of this film is absolutely beautiful. If you are somebody that really enjoys animated films, this film is completely top-notch. It is absolutely gorgeous to look at from start to end. One of the things with an animated film like this that I am always impressed by is the sound design. There is a meticulous level of detail that went into the sound design of this film, all of which adds to the realism of an otherworldly fantasy story. And really, when I was watching this film, I felt like I was just being transported back to my childhood watching one of these long winding tales of this like absolutely insane adventure that from start to end is just a really fun time. It's got characters that are relatable, that are all very likable and charming and interesting, and it's one of those things that just sort of sucks you in and you're along for the ride wherever it's headed. I also got some Final Fantasy vibes in this film, which I really appreciated, and it's worth noting that some of the music in this film sounds very much like it was influenced from the recent Pokemon game, specifically the theme found in Area Zero. If you have played the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That theme slaps. So the music is fantastic, the animation is top notch, and the story on the surface level is one of the most engaging and fun times I've had watching a movie this year. But beneath the surface of this film is a story that is incredibly deep and touching. And it's one of those situations where they're able to address a lot of real world issues that people deal with, but dressing it up within an animated film sort of makes it a little bit more palatable and certainly makes it a lot more fun to approach some of these issues than they normally would be. Throughout this story, Suzume is attempting to cope with the loss of her mother that happened when she was a child and her aunt taking her in. Now, in contrast, Suzume's aunt has dealt with these feelings of how she feels like she has lost a lot of her better years as she has become far more wrapped up in taking care of Suzume and making sure she is always loved and taken care of. I think one of the things that makes a character like Suzume so interesting in a film like this is that she is presented on the surface as an incredibly happy-go-lucky, very positive girl. But beneath that is somebody who has dealt with a devastating loss in their life, and Suzume has never really dealt with that grief. In my opinion, this film leans incredibly heavily into using visual metaphors to sort of manifest what Suzume and the other people in this movie are going through emotionally. Something that I really like. I love whenever a film presents a lot of things on the screen, but those things are not always what they seem. A lot of the times you have to look a little bit deeper than just what you're being shown. And I think that's another area where this movie really succeeds. They know just how much to blatantly explain while also knowing which things they can leave sort of up to your own interpretation. There are plenty of loose ends in this film that are never tied up, but they're not tied up for bad reasons. A lot of what is being shown is sort of up to you and how you want to interpret what's going on, who certain characters really are, what their relationships might be to other characters in this film. And I appreciate that sort of stuff. When they need to, they make sure to explain things that you really have to pay attention to. But in other areas of this film, it's sort of up to you what your interpretation of certain characters actually is. I also really enjoyed the ending to this film. I think there's a debate as to whether or not the decision Suzume makes at the end of this movie can be seen as selfish or can be seen as righteous. It's also sort of up to you how much of this film is really happening. Obviously, a decent chunk of this movie is actually happening as we watch it, but I think there's enough in this film that you're not really sure of whether or not it actually happened or it's happening the way that we're being shown, that I think makes it a lot of fun to think about and break down different aspects of what make this movie so special. Now, I wanted to briefly get into spoilers because there are two characters in this film that I think are incredibly important. Technically three, but two of them are sort of related. I think the significance of Soda being the chair is mostly because throughout this journey, Suzume is trying to cope with the loss of her mom. I think there's a lot of important symbolism in the fact that throughout basically the entire film, except for that one chunk in the middle, she is essentially going across the country on this journey with her mother, somebody that she has lost such a long time ago, dearly misses and has lost that connection to her. I also think losing that connection to her mother is symbolized when Soda has to become the Keystone, essentially removing that character, the chair, and Soda from the movie for a decent amount of time. I think that it's important because there's even more emphasis now placed on Suzume finally confronting the emotional grief that she suffered when she was a child, losing her mother, and that grief being brought forward because of now losing Soda. Now, the Keystone that becomes the talking cat, I think, is one of the most interesting characters in this film, mostly because they never explicitly tell us who this cat was. We have one clue about who this character is, and it's the fact that when Suzume goes to the hospital and talks to Soda's grandfather then has a conversation with the cat after Suzume leaves and hints at the fact that these two know each other, that the cat and Soda's grandfather had some sort of previous relationship. Cut to 15-20 minutes later, a black cat appears in this film as well and is very affectionate towards the Keystone cat. I have to imagine the black cat represents the grandfather who, when he was in the hospital bed, said that he was too weak to fulfill his duties as the Keystone. It just seems like there was some relationship between that character and whoever the Keystone cat used to be, because we learned from Soda being turned into the chair that the Keystone is an object or a being or a creature, but it was a person first, and we never learn who that cat was, which I actually really like. I like that that is up to interpretation, who you think this cat is, if they are the same creature, if the cat is an offshoot of the grandfather. I don't know, there's a lot there, but I really like that kind of stuff. I absolutely loved this movie. I love films that take me back to the Hayao Miyazaki days. I have not watched movies like that in so long, but I always loved that animation style, and I always loved the simplicity of those films in terms of what the story is conveying on the surface, while also having these wild fantasy elements that other people in the movie universe also just sort of accept. Like, they're weird, but they're not that weird, and I love that kind of stuff. But it was really just such a phenomenal experience to be taken back to these younger years and thinking back to my childhood and how much these stories used to impact me and how much they still do. I think there's a lot of value in stuff like that. Suzume may not be the easiest film to find, which is sort of ironic because that's a lot of what this story is about, sort of hunting down certain things that are maybe not the easiest to discover. But I think if you are lucky enough to live somewhere where this film is being shown, it's absolutely worth paying full price, using a movie subscription, whatever you have access to. This is one that you do not want to miss. One of the best movies of the year. I am so excited that I had an opportunity to go see it, and if you get a chance to see it, I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thanks for watching.